Soviet collapse is no longer a warning. It is a shadow stretching across Russia, a sign that something enormous is shifting under Putin's feet. The cracks are not loud yet. They are quiet, slow, hidden behind the noise of the war in Ukraine. But if you listen closely, you can hear them. A country that once claimed to be unbreakable is now struggling to hold itself together. Whole regions that Moscow believed were loyal are slipping into defiance. People who stayed silent for decades are finding a new voice. And the truth is beginning to take shape. Putin is no longer fighting one war, he is fighting two, one in Ukraine and one at home. The second one may be the one that ends him. Picture Russia on a map, a massive stretch of land almost too big to comprehend, but size hides weakness. Inside that landmass are more than 80 regions, 23 of them ethnic republics with their own identities, languages and histories. They never truly forgot who they were before Moscow absorbed them. They never forgot what was taken from them. For years, Moscow controlled them with fear, money, and propaganda. That strategy worked as long as people believed the Kremlin was strong, as long as the economy held, as long as the war stayed far away. Today, none of those conditions exist. And for the first time in decades, Russians in far-flung republics are daring to ask a forbidden question. What if we no longer need Moscow? That question is the quiet beginning of an empire's collapse. Look at what happened earlier this year in Bashkortostan. Thousands of people flooded the streets of Ufa. They spoke their own language. They chanted their own cultural slogans. They were not asking for anything extreme. They were asking to protect their identity. The Kremlin responded the only way it knows how: riot police, mass arrests, internet blackouts. But something unexpected happened. Instead of fear crushing the protests spread. Videos went viral across other republics. Young people watched and realized that they were not alone. Moscow could silence a city, but it could not silence an entire generation, and Bashkortostan was only the beginning. In Dagestan, the anger runs deeper. Mothers blocked roads to stop their sons from being taken to the war. Local clerics stood in mosques and called the fight in Ukraine unjust. Young men refused to board buses. Entire villages protested together. Dagestan now has one of the highest draft evasion rates in the whole country. The Kremlin tried to send in the National Guard. It changed nothing. The fear that once controlled the region has cracked. A micro-hook is forming here. Because Dagestan's unrest was not about money, it was about survival, it was about dignity. It was about a people realizing that they were being treated as disposable. The same energy exists in Buryatia, in Tuva, in Kalmykia, and across the North Caucasus. These areas have suffered the highest death rates in the Ukraine war. Poor villages have lost entire generations of men. Coffins arrive while Moscow's elites drink wine and pose for state television. The resentment keeps growing. The question keeps spreading. Why should they fight for a government that does not treat them as equals? This is no longer about nationalism. It is about the simple human truth that no family wants to give away its sons for nothing. And there is another crack spreading across Russia's foundation: money, or rather, the lack of it. Russia is under more than 16,000 international sanctions. Nearly every foreign investor has vanished. Inflation is rising fast. Fuel prices in Siberia have doubled. Schools cannot afford heating. Hospitals cannot buy supplies. Many Siberian families survive on incomes that are 1/3 of what people earn in Moscow, and yet these same regions produce the resources that keep the country alive. Yakutia produces almost all of Russia's diamonds. Mines made more than $4 billion in 2024. The region received less than 2% of that money. Villages have collapsing roofs while Moscow's elite buy penthouses in Dubai. That kind of injustice does not disappear. It grows. It festers. It ignites. At the same time, Putin's government has tried to erase regional identities by stripping minority languages from schools and pushing a single patriotic curriculum. In some places, teaching your own language is treated like extremism. Activists defending their culture are labeled radicals or terrorists. The result is the opposite of what the Kremlin wants. Instead of loyalty, it creates bitterness. Instead of unity, it creates rebellion. A quiet rebellion that grows every day. Online, entire communities share their stories and frustrations. Telegram groups, VK groups, TikTok clips from exile communities in Mongolia and Europe. A young man from Tuva can go online and see how Mongolians freely speak their language, keep their traditions, and pass their heritage to their children. Then he looks at Moscow's policies. He sees a contradiction. That contradiction becomes anger, and anger becomes action. Ukraine's resistance has also changed everything. Russians from minority republics are watching a smaller nation stand up to Moscow and survive. They see a country of 40 million people refusing to break, refusing to kneel. They see Ukrainians fighting for their identity and winning global respect. And a dangerous idea begins to take root. If Ukraine can stand alone, why not us? That question terrifies the Kremlin. Not because it is unrealistic, but because it is realistic, very realistic. And this is where history steps in. To understand Russia's current fracture, you have to look back centuries. Russia has always been an empire, even when it denied it. From the moment Moscow expanded into the Volga, the Caucasus, and Siberia, it ruled through fear. Not trust, not partnership. Fear. Entire cultures were absorbed or suppressed. Rebellions were met with massacres. Languages were pushed aside, identities were rewritten. The Soviet Union did the same. It promised freedom, but delivered control. It promised equality, but delivered fear. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many nations left. But dozens of smaller nations remained trapped. Their identities were never restored. Their resources were never returned. Putin's rise in the 2000s restored order, but it was a cold order. An order built on centralization. Elections were controlled. Governors were chosen by the Kremlin. Regional constitutions were rewritten. Dagestan's special status was abolished. Autonomy was pushed aside. The empire simply changed its flag. But the old contradictions remained. Now those contradictions are exploding, and the Kremlin is running out of ways to stop them. In the North Caucasus, Chechnya appears loyal, but its loyalty is bought with money and fear. Kadyrov rules like a king, but even he cannot calm the resentment left behind from two brutal wars. In Dagestan, Ingushetia, Kabardino-Balkaria, Karachay-Cherkessia, the mix of poverty, corruption, and grief is reaching a breaking point. In Bashkortostan and Tatarstan, cultural pride is turning into political ambition. In Siberia and the Far East, anger is rising among ethnic Russians themselves. Cities like Khabarovsk and Vladivostok are discovering a new identity, a Siberian identity that rejects Moscow's control. These people are not asking for their own country, they are asking for respect, they are asking for fairness. But when Moscow refuses, those moderate demands begin to evolve into something else. Something the Kremlin cannot control. Add to this another crack religion. In the North Caucasus, Islam is a core part of identity. Moscow has tried for decades to suppress Islamic traditions. When they conflict with state policies, this fuels rage. When clerics call the war unjust, people listen. Meanwhile, the Russian Orthodox Church receives funding, protection, and influence, creating a deep divide between what Moscow supports and what local communities believe. This religious divide sharpens the political divide. It pushes Moscow further away from the regions and pushes the regions closer toward defiance. And now another crack is appearing. A dangerous one, a succession crisis. Putin has ruled for more than 20 years. There is no clear successor. The elite are preparing for a future without him. Security chiefs, oligarchs, and regional leaders are quietly competing. Some want harsher repression, some want reform, some want to preserve their power at any cost. If Putin weakens or disappears, the fight to replace him could ignite a free-for-all inside the Kremlin. And if the center becomes unstable, the regions will move. Some will demand autonomy, some will demand independence, some will simply stop listening to Moscow. A distracted Kremlin is an open door, and many regions are already standing at that door. The Kremlin knows this. That is why Putin still relies on the same old playbook: co-opt local elites, bribe regions with small investments, allow limited cultural concessions, intimidate activists, flood social media with propaganda, threaten communities quietly, reward loyalty, punish defiance. These tactics have worked for decades, but they work less every year. Because money is running out, fear is fading, and information now travels faster than the FSB can censor it. Meanwhile, foreign powers are paying attention. China sees opportunity and danger. Opportunity because a weak Russia gives Beijing access to Siberian resources. Danger because Russia's collapse could inspire unrest inside China's own border regions. Turkey sees opportunity in its cultural influence. over Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, and other Turkic republics. Europe fears instability, but also sees a chance to gain influence in Karelia and Kaliningrad. The world is watching, some hoping for stability, some preparing for change. And now we reach the heart of the story. What happens next? Three possible futures stand out. The first is controlled fragmentation. Regions keep pushing for language rights, budget autonomy, and cultural protection. Moscow gives small concessions until it cannot keep up. The federation stays whole on paper, but the glue is gone. It becomes a loose collection of semi-independent regions. The second is a chaotic breakup, a rapid collapse triggered by economic failure, military defeat, or a sudden change of leadership. Regions declare independence. Militias form, foreign powers step in, borders become unstable. Conflicts erupt over resources. This is the nightmare scenario. The third is a frozen empire. Russia remains whole, but only because repression becomes the foundation of daily life. Stability becomes an illusion. Anger simmers beneath the surface. Young people lose hope and look abroad. The country survives, but its spirit is broken. All three futures lead to the same truth. Putin's empire is crumbling, not from a single event, but from thousands of small fractures spreading at once. Cultural pride, economic injustice, religious divides, massive war casualties, generational anger, and a leadership that cannot offer any future except fear. Fear can silence people for a time. It cannot silence them forever, and the Kremlin knows it. The biggest crack is not in Dagestan or Tatarstan or Siberia. It is in the minds of millions of Russians who no longer believe that Moscow has the right to rule them. That belief is the beginning of every revolution. And that is why the world is now watching something that has not happened since 1991. An empire realizing that its strength was only an illusion. The collapse will not come all at once. It will come slowly, quietly, then suddenly. And when it does, the world map may never look the same. Before you go, remember, we're completely independent. No big networks, no sponsors, and no government influence. In a world full of corruption and scripted news, your support keeps real journalism alive. So please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps.